I have a mailing list. I send out newsletters called 3 Good Things, and it's like 4 times a year, and then there's like a little flurry in the summer when I have a new book that comes out. And in October, usually I have a book cover reveal. And I do have a super fun book cover that I'm about to reveal in October, so if you're on it, you will see it first before everyone. But basically, I just, years ago when I started thinking I should have a newsletter, I was like, but I just don't have that much news. Like, what am I even going to send to people? And I decided that I would, basically send out cool stuff that I had found in the world. So here's a great rom-com that I saw. Here's a great nonfiction read. Here's a great podcast that I found. Here's a beautiful piece of art. Here's a lady who takes I found out a lot of cool stuff actually over the years. A lady who takes old Bratz dolls and takes their faces off and repaints them so that they look less frightening, and then knits them like little kid clothes and kind of gives them this new. She rescues them from Goodwills and stuff. And also the guys who, the classical musicians who play, music on rubber chickens. Just fun stuff. I just think of it as joy for your inbox. So it's very fun for me to find cool things to share. I've got a big long list of stuff that's just waiting for its time to shine. And so this is my mailing list, and I'm weirdly obsessed with it. I really, really want to get people on this mailing list because I feel like algorithms are not going to keep us connected. You know what I mean? You never know. If people follow you on Facebook or Instagram, you never know if they're seeing anything. But this is I can respectfully, 4 times a year, send out a message that matters, and hopefully it'll just come right to you, and we don't have any middleman causing trouble. So anyway, I'd love it if you wanted to sign up if you haven't already. I know you guys already did. I don't know if you have no pressure. Hello, old friend from yesterday. But you don't have to. But and if you try it and you don't like it or whatever, you can unsubscribe, and I'll never know. I don't even check. Because one time when I was just starting at this many years ago, I checked and I saw that my 3rd grade teacher had unsubscribed, and I was my feelings were really hurt, and I was I'm never looking again. So I don't know. I'll never know. Okay, that's not part of the talk. That's just, please join the mailing list if you would like to. I don't know when we're starting, and I have no sense of time, and I don't know what day it is or what year it is, honestly. Is it Thursday? It's Friday. It's Friday. Oh, it's guesswork.
It's Friday. Okay, so now I have to hold both of these and do this. Okay.
Do you want me to hold something for you?
I think I'm okay.
You guys.
Hi, my name is Chastity, and I'm from Rapid City. And I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of the South Dakota Humanities Council, which produces the annual Festival of Books. We hope that you'll enjoy the festival and that you'll provide feedback about this year's event. The link to our online survey is available at sdbookfestival.com, and QR codes can be found at our information tables. You can help keep the festival free by making a tax-deductible donation to the South Dakota Humanities Council. To donate, visit sdhumanities.org or stop at the SDHC information booth at the Lodge at Deadwood. With your gift, you can enter our drawing for the original festival guide cover painting by local artist Gary Steinley. I don't have one on me. Donate $50 for your first raffle entry and $10 for each entry after that. I'm sure you've all seen the festival cover by now. This festival would not be possible without the generous support of the numerous organizations and individuals who have already donated and are acknowledged on the back cover of the festival guide. All right, and today's programming is called Joy in Storytelling. Is the New York Times best-selling author of books including How to Walk Away, Things You Save in a Fire, and What You Wish For. She has made Amazon's Top 100 Books of 2019, Goodreads' Best Books of the Year, and many more. Her novels, The Lost Husband and Happiness for Beginners, are now adapted as movies on Netflix. Center lives in her hometown of Houston, Texas, with her husband, 2 kids, and their fluffy but fierce dog. Welcome.
don't use this though, right, guys? Just this one too? Oh, should I take this off? Do them both. Okay, a lot of details. Hi. Thank you guys for being here. It's so nice to see this little room full of all you cute people. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about writing and how I became a writer. It's a little bit of a Cinderella story, and the theme that goes through everything always is just joy. I'm not great at joy, so I work really, really hard at getting better and finding it, and that's why I write stories that have lots of it in there. And then, you know, I'm sure I'll forget lots of stuff. Y'all are welcome to ask me questions. I'm very chatty. So, okay, I wrote my first novel when I was in the 6th grade. I was very, very awkward, like soul-crushingly awkward when I was in the 6th grade. I had every bad thing that a 6th grade girl can possibly have. I had them all. I had huge buck teeth with braces top and bottom and crisscrossed rubber bands and a headgear that I was supposed to snap in at night. I had terrible hair with like a mullet in the back. I had no fashion sense. I had long, flat feet like snorkeling flippers. That is still true. I was problematic. I was very awkward. I knew I was awkward. And actually, I can validate, objectively, how awkward I was, because I was the middle child of 3 girls. And my older sister was cool. And I was so awful that she had to stage an intervention with my mom where she was like, you have got to take her to the mall and give her a makeover. She is bringing down the entire family. So I was basically like Lydia, right, in a Jane Austen novel, like I was ruining my sister's prospects. So my mom did take me to the mall, but it really didn't help, right? That was the whole thing. And I had this antenna. I knew how bad it was. I could see people's reactions to me as I was approaching them. I could see the fear on their faces. I just basically spent that whole 6th grade year just hunched over in apology, I'm sorry. I too wish this were not happening, but I just don't know what to do about it, right? So it was rough, and I was very hard on myself, and the only good thing about that year was that I had 2 best friends who were also awkward and also miserable, and we were all in love with the 1980s boy band Duran Duran. And we got this idea that we should write novels about meeting the band members, and we should cast ourselves as the main characters in the novels. And so that's what we did. That was my only joy in 6th grade for that whole year. We had little spiral notebooks, and we each were writing an individual separate novel. We cast ourselves as the main characters, and we would basically suffer through the school week as only 6th grade girls can suffer. And then on the weekends, we would get together and have sleepovers, and we would put on our PJs and pile into somebody's bed and open up our little spiral notebook novels and read them to each other in installments, like Dickens. And the thing is, we all very politely included each other as secondary characters. So not only was it fun for me to write stories where, honestly, where I was triumphing in ways that I was definitely not triumphing in real life. It was really fun for me to hear my friends' stories, to hear what they were up to, but also to hear what I was up to in their stories. So it was just super fun. It was off the charts fun. And just full disclosure, I will tell you the plot of my 6th grade Duran Duran novel. I basically invented fan fiction. You're welcome. Okay, and this did not really happen. Every now and then I'll tell this story and people will be like, I can't believe that happened to you. And I'll be like, let me stop you right there. This definitely did not happen. This is pure, bald, 6th grade girl wish fulfillment and total fiction. But in the novel that I wrote in 6th grade about Duran Duran,
Duran Duran is driving through my childhood neighborhood in Houston, Texas, when, as luck would have it, they get a flat tire, like right in front of my house, right? They're in their limo on their way to a concert, and pop, there goes the tire. This is the 1980s. There are no cell phones. They have to find a landline to call a tire guy. So they walk up to the closest front door, which just happens to be my front door. And I just happen to be home at the time watching MTV and busting my dance moves to their Hungry Like the Wolf video. So I hear the bell, I go answer the door, I find all 5 of these beautiful world-famous rockers standing on my front stoop. I freak out internally, but I play it cool. I let them use the phone. I make them microwave popcorn like a gracious hostess. And then, I don't know what was going on with the tire guy that day, but he was like super, super busy, could not get to us in a timely manner, and therefore I had to spend like the whole afternoon hanging out in my mother's living room, making pleasant chit-chat with all 5 members of Duran Duran, again, fiction. And somehow, in this one short but very magical span of time, all 5 of them fell in love with me. And that was the whole plot. I had to decide which one to marry. So, as you can tell, it was the greatest novel ever written in the history of novels. It is actually so bad that every now and then I'll get nostalgic. I still have it, like in a little Rubbermaid storage tub up in the attic. And every now and then I'll like go up and like think, oh, I'll just read a little, like my cute 6th grade self. And then I start reading, and it's like I have this physiological reaction. It's like chopping onions or something. Like my eyes just start to water, and I'm like, whoo, that is bad. Wow, that is really bad. It is so bad that my older sister has explicit instructions that if I am ever hit by a bus, her number 1 job is to get to the attic and burn that novel. I'm like, there is no time for grieving. Do not go to the funeral. You have 1 job. Destroy it before it sees the light of day. My publisher, Macmillan, one time invited me to come to New York and film a couple of little Instagram videos that, could go through people's feeds of me just talking about stuff. And they were like, do you still have that, like very chit-chatty, very casual. They were like, do you still have that Duran Duran novel? And I was like, oh, yeah. And they were like, could you bring it with you to New York? And I was like, sure. I'm so dumb. I thought they would just want me to like show it to them, like sort of hold it up like a dead fish and be like, yep, it happened. But they actually, when I got there and I'm sitting on this stool, documentary style, they asked me to read from it aloud. And I'm so obedient. I didn't know how to say no to that. So I did. There's actual footage that exists in the world of me reading aloud from this story. And if it ever comes through your Instagram feed, just know that's not acting. That's real human humiliation. That's the real deal. That's the most humiliating thing I've ever done on purpose, was read that out loud. And even as it was happening, I was thinking, I can't believe that I'm reading this to people. It's very bad. But, as bad as it was and continues to be in my attic, it was also genius, It was genius. We rescued ourselves in 6th grade. I was going down in flames in the 6th grade. I was so mean to myself every single day. I just got up and started making lists of my personal flaws and areas for self-improvement. I did not have one kind word for myself at that age. It was just one criticism after another of all the things that were wrong with me. And I really, really, really needed some encouragement. I needed some hope. I needed a sense that things were going to get better, that I at least had a shot of pulling myself together and figuring out some kind of a life that would be worthwhile in the future, right? And so we invented these imaginary versions of these world-famous rockers who could say all the kind and encouraging things to us that we refuse to say to ourselves. You know, every time I tell the story, if my mom's in the room, I'm like, I just needed some encouragement. And my mom's like, I was encouraging you. And I'm like, you didn't count. I needed this encouragement from Simon Le Bon. Is that so much to ask for? We needed to be sort of seen, you know? You know how invisible you feel at that age? And a lot of times, even not at that age. I wanted to at least be able to imagine a world where I was valuable. And I was having a lot of trouble seeing that at that time. And here's the thing, it worked. I mean, it was fiction. I wasn't crazy. I didn't think it was real, you know? I did not really think that Duran Duran showed up at my house and fell in love with me. But it didn't matter that it was fiction, because here's the thing about fiction. And this, you know, when I was 12, I decided that I wanted to be a writer, right? That experience of writing those Duran Duran novels was the thing that hooked me and basically made me doomed to want to be a writer, which is, you know, deciding to be a writer is kind of like deciding to win the lottery. It's not a super viable career path, right? But this was what I wanted from the age of 12. And I set my whole life to trying to figure out how stories work, right? To reading them, writing them, memorizing song lyrics, writing for the school newspaper, writing unhappy love poems, you know, all the things that you do if you want to be a writer. I kept journals for 10 years straight, just obsessively cataloging everything that would ever happen to me so I could learn how to be a writer. And it was all that, going to Vassar College and majoring in English, going on to graduate school and getting a master's in creative writing, then becoming a novelist. Like, here is the smartest thing after doing all of that, after spending all these decades obsessing over stories and why they're so powerful and trying to figure out how they work. The smartest thing that I have figured out in all of this time, because I really don't have any other interests. This is the only thing I think about. The smartest thing I have figured out is that there is a very special magic that happens in fiction that you can't get anywhere else in human life. There's something really special about fiction. And here's what it is. This is every smart thing I know in the world. When you get lost in a story, whether you are binge watching something on Netflix or reading a whole series of books that you can't put down, when you get lost in a fictional story, you know that it's not true, but you believe it anyway. You know it's not true. You know it's not real. You know somebody made it all up. You know, when you read a story and the dog dies and you are crying about the dog, that dog doesn't exist. Somebody made up that dog, but that dog matters to you. The story matters to you. This is how stories make you laugh, make you cry, get you invested, keep you turning pages late into the night. This particular magic lets us bypass our heads and go straight down into our hearts, right? It's the thing that makes its own rules, right? We can think we think what we think. We think we know how the world works. We've got everything separated into all these categories. But fiction just gets to have its own categories. It gets to be true and not true at the same time, right? It gets to be a total lie and weirdly be the truth at the same time. And there's something really life-changing, really powerful about that. And I've pretty much spent my whole life trying to figure out what that is and how it works. And one of the things that I've thought about a lot around fiction is that fiction works almost exactly the way human memories work. So this is a lot, but I've done a lot of reading on this. We tend to think of memory as something that's like, I don't know, videos in the back of your head, right? Like if somebody says to you, what did you do on your 18th birthday? You think, oh, I'll go back into the giant library of my brain, right? Bust out the Dewey Decimal System, find that video, rewatch it, and remind myself, what did I do on my 18th birthday? But that's not how memory really works at all. It's not like the full event fully recorded in your memory, right? And etched so that you have it forever. Any memory that you make, you're really only encoding a few things into your memory, right? You're picking a few little details. So like if you remember today, you might remember that we are in a basement. I don't know. You might remember this green thing now that I've pointed it out. You probably wouldn't have remembered it before. You'll pick a few things. Like, honestly, if you tried right now to like notice every single detail in this room, there's no way you could possibly do it. And even if you did, you would bore yourself to tears, right? This is one of the things that novelists know. Only so many details are really necessary. So what you do is you pick a few, the most important, the most salient, the most emotionally evocative details from anything that you are deciding to remember, and you put those things into your memory. And then when somebody asks you to remember that moment, you go back, you pull out the details that you remembered, and then you fill everything else in like a plausible fiction. And that's exactly how it works when you read a story, because that is what authors give you. Authors give you a few details, right? I mean, unless it's a Victorian author, then they give you everything. But, you know, modern writers, in a moment that they're trying to describe for you, they pick 2, 3, I mean 4 if you're pushing it. Really salient, really evocative details. And that's it. That's all you get as a writer. And then you hand those over to the reader, and you expect the reader to do the rest. And the reader does it like magic without even noticing that it's happening. We all know how to do this because this is how we do memories, and this is how we write the stories of our own lives. We do it all the time. We don't even notice that we're doing it, right? So memory is a kind of fiction. And when you read actual fiction, it feels like a memory. So that's what's so cool about stories, and that's one of the reasons why they're so incredibly powerful, is because they didn't happen to you, but they feel like they did, right? Like I did not fight in the French resistance in World War II, but I read The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, and I kind of feel like I did. I was like, yeah, those were tough times. You know? You know, I've never been to Scotland, but I read Outlander, so I feel like I've time traveled and been all over the place. Stories aren't real, but they feel real, right? Your mind makes it real. It's like the Matrix. You make it real. It feels like something that happened to you. And so what's cool about that and what's powerful about that is that it's not human experience, but it's the next best thing. And that means it has this special power to teach us things that almost nothing else in human life actually has. Because wisdom in real life and in fiction comes from lived experience, right? The hard things we go through, the big things we go through, the joyful things we go through, the things in our lives that matter. After we get through those things, we pull lessons out of those things and we figure out, what does it mean? You know, what's important in life? Who are we in the face of it all, right? That's where wisdom comes from. You can't get wisdom out of a textbook. Wisdom is not something you can learn about remotely. Wisdom is only something you can get from your real life experience. And fiction isn't real life experience, but it's pretty close. It feels like real life experience. So what's cool about stories is that they're kind of like a cheat for human life. You get to step into a fictional story and go through an experience with a point of view character, and then you get to come out the other side and you get to pull wisdom out of that experience that you didn't even have. And that person doesn't even exist. I mean, it's really remarkable when you think about it, right? And let me say something else. If the writer is really cooking, if the writer is really doing a good job with that story, you don't just step into the story and go through it with that point of view character, like side by side, shoulder to shoulder. If the writer is really doing a great job, you step inside the skin of that point of view character, right? You sort of like become that person. You like merge with that person, and you're seeing what they see, and you're hearing what they hear. But not only that, you're wondering about what they wonder about. You're thinking their thoughts. And you're not just thinking their thoughts, you're feeling their emotions with them, as them. When they're hoping for something, you're hoping for that thing. When they're scared of something, you're scared of that thing. That's how thrillers work. That's how they get your heart thumping. And they've done all these studies on it, right? That like when people are reading fiction, there are all these mirror neurons firing in their brain. Their brain thinks it's really happening. Part of their brain thinks it's really happening. So you have these physiological reactions to things that you're reading about that aren't even real, and your body is responding to it like it is real. So when you read a romance novel, for example, which is my favorite kind of novel, you get to fall in love vicariously. And not only, you know it's not you, and you know that these characters are fictional and it's not even really happening. You get that. But you also get all the oxytocin and all the serotonin that you would be getting if this were really happening to you. And so you go to the grocery store and you're like shopping for dinner and you're just walking around feeling happy. You're like, oh, these guys are going to get together. So, fiction is this remarkable thing that I am totally obsessed with and have been for a long, long time. And I have this battle cry that's read for joy. I've got it on stickers. I say it all the time. I've got it on a t-shirt. And this is one of the things I want to talk about today is reading for joy, because if I could give the reading world one gift, it's to let yourself read whatever you want to read. Like no guilt, no weirdness, no feeling like you should be reading something harder. You should just be reading whatever stories are calling to you. And this all got started for me a few years ago when I was at a party, like a little literary party. And, you know, as happens at literary parties, I was chatting with this lady and we started talking about, you know, what were we reading? And she told me that she had been trying to read the collected works of Faulkner that summer. And then she looked really, really guilty. And then she just went, but I haven't gotten very far. I just keep falling asleep. And I was like, oh, sweetheart, that's not your fault. That's Faulkner's fault. If he's not keeping you awake, he's not doing his job, you know? And I'm not picking on Faulkner. For another person at another time, that might have been the perfect read. But clearly, the fact that she was falling asleep meant that it wasn't the right read for her at that right time, right? So her brain had made this decision that she needed to be reading Faulkner, but clearly the rest of her disagreed and wanted to be reading something else. So it got me really thinking about what it is that happens when we try to force ourselves to read the stuff that we don't really want to read. And that could be the ghost of your high school English teacher haunting you and saying, you know, you need to be reading Melville right now, you know, not that hot pink beach read you've been eyeballing or like whatever it is. You know, but it could also be, you know, just a general sense that you possibly absorbed, and I say this with a lot of love, for teachers of all varieties, because I'm married to one and I used to be an English teacher. It's possible you absorbed that attitude from English class. This idea that reading has to be work and not play. Right? I think a lot of us who love to read as children got a little older, got into like maybe high school, maybe college, and reading suddenly became work, right? Reading suddenly became about achievement, about reading things that were hard. I mean, I went from reading Frances Hodgson Burnett, you know, A Little Princess and The Secret Garden in 6th grade and just having the best time ever, to, you know, high school reading like Kafka, right? Different vibes. It's all fine. They're good in different ways. But I think what kind of happens to a lot of us in high school, like for a long time I thought it was just me, and then I started talking about it in book clubs, and I started realizing it's a lot of people. A lot of us wanted to be good students, and we cared about stories, and we cared about reading, and so we started taking it really, really seriously, and somehow we like just beat the fun right out of it, right? Just crushed the fun right out of it. And I'm trying to sort of bring the fun back to it. I think one of the things that sometimes happens in high school, not all high schools, I say this with, again, a lot of love for high school and English and teachers, is that you sort of shift at that age as you grow up from reading from the heart to reading with the head. And reading with the head is fine. I think it's great to be able to like break something down and do a 5-paragraph theme about it. I'm all for it. You know, if you can grab a story by the horns and wrestle it to the ground and, you know, pull the meaning out of it, I'm all for that. But I think really the important stuff that's going on with us in life is happening in the heart. Right? So, I'm going to tell you an embarrassing true thing about myself. Or at least it used to feel embarrassing, maybe less so. The more I talk about it, funny how that works, the less embarrassing it feels. So I'm going to tell you the story of how I fell in love with romance novels. Grocery store romance novels. I received one as a gift. I was already a working novelist. Most of the novels that I had read in my life were very, very literary novels. I had never read a romance novel before, but my agent represents a lot of romance writers. And she sent me one in the mail one day as a gift. And I had absorbed, honestly, to be frank, in my life, accidentally, a fair bit of literary snobbery around romance novels. I think a lot of people have that. Not the enlightened ones, of course, like myself now, but, you know, some of us have that. And I didn't want to be rude to my agent, so I opened it up and I thought, well, I'll read the first chapter, you know, and then I'll tell her that I took a look at it, right? So I opened it up, and I started reading, and 3 hours later, I was in the car driving to the bookstore to get another one. I felt like a person who had spent her entire life eating boneless, skinless chicken breast, and I had just discovered chocolate cake. That book was delicious. It was so much fun. I didn't know that reading could be that much fun. I mean, I had not had that much fun reading a book since I was a kid. And I had just made a promise to myself, not that long before, that I was not going to read anything anymore just because everybody else was reading it, or just because I thought I should. I had just made this promise to myself that I was just going to read whatever really called to me, genuinely called to me. So that was fortuitous, because then I spent the next 4 years reading nothing but romance novels. Nothing but romance novels. People were like, how does your husband feel about this? I was like, he's doing fine. He's doing fine. He's happy about it. It's all good. Everybody wins. So it was a really interesting moment in my life. I am an overthinker by nature. And I was like, what is going on with me? Why is this happening? You know, why am I reading all these books? Why can't I read anything else? What is the deal? And what I finally decided was that there is something really unique about romance novels that I needed at that moment in my life. They're very joyful. Romance novels give you a guaranteed happy ending. You know when you start a romance novel that everything's going to be all right, right? The two love interests can be thrown into a snake pit by pirates, and you know it's going to be okay in the end because it's a romance novel. Everybody's going to be all right. They're going to be rescued. They're going to overcome all their internal and external obstacles. Somebody's going to take their shirt off. And it's going to be a happy ending. You have a lot to look forward to. And here's the thing. When writers are trying to keep you turning the pages in a story, what's fueling that in all stories is anticipation. That's what stories run on. That's the fuel that stories use. Writers lay down clues for you, and you, the readers, read along and you pick up the clues. And reading those clues, you think to yourself, oh, that kid's going to get arrested. Right? Or, that man's going to go to jail. Or, that dude is cheating on his wife. Like, whatever it is, you're putting the clues together and you're making predictions about what's going to happen. And that's what keeps you interested. You want to see if your predictions are right. And you feel emotions, sometimes very strong emotions, about what you've predicted and how it turns out, right? Most novels, not all, but most, run on a type of anticipation that is negatively valenced, which means you're worrying about them. You're worrying about them. You know, you're like, ugh, is she going to be okay, right? Is he going to beat the cancer, right? Are they going to win the race? It's a sort of a clamped down, worried feeling. But it works, and it keeps you turning the pages, but there's a lot of worry. What I discovered in adult life is that I don't like worrying. And there's a lot of it, right? When you grow up, there's so much to worry about. I worry about my kids, my husband, my parents, my pets. I'm worried about the neighbors. I'm worried about people on Instagram I don't even know. I'm a championship worrier. And what I kind of discovered as I grew up and had kids and was trying to be an adult was that in my very rare leisure time, in my precious leisure time, I didn't necessarily want to sign up for more of that worry. You know, I wanted to sign up to feel better. So here's the thing about romance novels, and this is just a little side note. This is a PSA about romance novels. You don't have to read them, but I just figured this out, so I just feel like I need to share. They're positively valenced. You're anticipating things. You're putting clues together, but those clues are not giving you things to worry about and things to dread. They're giving you things to look forward to, right? You're like, ugh, he likes her. And so then you have 300 pages of looking forward to this good thing, this wonderful thing. And there's a name for what you're feeling when you're looking forward to something good in the future, and it's called hope. Right? That's what you get to feel when you're reading those novels. So it took me a while to figure this out, like a few years. But basically, that was why they were so appealing to me. And I'm putting that in the past tense. They're still appealing to me. I still love them. I wanted that feeling. You know, stories give you different kinds of feelings. All different kinds of stories give you different feelings. Like mystery novels give you intense curiosity. What happened, right? You need to know. You'll stay up really late to find out what happened. Thrillers give you like that heart-thumping, adrenaline, like, oh my gosh, are we going to figure this out before time runs out? The bomb's going to go off kind of feeling, right? And your heart will physically race when you are reading those books. And some people love that feeling, and then they love it when we get to the end and everything's saved in the nick of time, and then they can have that like whoosh of relief, like, okay, we're good. Nobody died. Except the person at the start who got chopped into 50 pieces. I don't know. Every story has some kind of emotion that it's trying to push you towards. Romance novels, of course, give you a simulated feeling of falling in love, which makes the whole world sparkle. Sorry, just my personal bias. But here's the thing. This is what I've been trying to say, is that I want everybody to give themselves permission to read the stories that they want to read. Like maybe you love that feeling of being curious. Maybe you love that feeling of racing to figure out what's happening before time runs out. Whatever it is, I want to give you like beautiful permission to enjoy whatever that is, right? Because I think we kind of get this wrong. I think we have a kind of a wrong schema for stories where we think that literary stories are at the top and it's a hierarchy, right? And everything else is worse than literary. And I'm not against literary, but the best, but I don't think it's a hierarchy. I think it's a universe. I think stories are a universe. I think there are all kinds of different stories that are going to do all kinds of different things to you at all kinds of different moments in your life. Maybe you need a thriller during the pandemic because you need things to be worse than real life. You know? Maybe you need a mystery so that your brain has something to chew on when you're worried about something else. Maybe you need a love story to lift you up when somebody you love is sick and you just need that oxytocin to help you get through the day. You may not even know what it is that you need that's in that story, because I think stories go so deep in that way that they bypass the head and go straight to the heart, that they're answering questions for us that we don't even know we need to ask. They're helping us wrestle with feelings that we don't even really necessarily know we need to grapple with. They're just in there doing big, healing, nourishing work. But they can't do that work if you're deciding on the stories with your head. They can't do that work if you're choosing your stories based on, you know, like what your grumpy old English teacher would have chosen for you. The only way to find the stories that are going to resonate for you and be meaningful to you and matter to you is to pay attention to that little tug that's personal, that's yours, that pulls you towards a certain story. And to not fight that tug when you feel it, to like respect it and honor it. And when you hear about a story and you're like, ooh, that sounds good, right? To go follow that feeling, right? To trust your own compass to guide you towards the stories that are going to really resonate deep, deep down beyond anything that your brain can even get close to. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about reading for joy. It's about finding your own compass. And the best example that I can think of for that, or like the best analogy that I have for it, is like music, right? Like English is one of the 3 R's, so we do a lot of English in high school, and it's on the SAT, and there's a lot of pressure, and you've got, papers you have to write, and you're graded and evaluated and judged based on how well you can do that in a very academic way. Music, you get a little bit of it in school, but not at the same level. But what if you had music class the way we had English class? And what if you had been told that the only good music was classical music and anything else was suboptimal, right? But what if you really kind of loved country music or, I don't know, klezmer bands or whatever it is that you really loved? What if there was something else that you wanted to listen to, but you only gave yourself permission to listen to classical because you had been told that was the only valuable one? The way that music really works is that you hear music out in the world and you feel that tug. You're like, oh, I love that song. If you're me, you love that song and then you put it on repeat for like 2 weeks and drive your entire family really, really crazy. But that's the feeling that I'm talking about, that tug. It's the same feeling that you feel when you love a song. And you don't know why you love the song. You don't have words for it. You can't justify it. You just feel it. You love that song. It's a great song. The same thing is true when a story crosses your path. If you hear about a story and you're like, oh, I want to read that story, you should read that story. And you shouldn't let your head get in the way of your heart. Okay, that's my talk on reading for joy. Do you guys want to ask me any questions? Are there things we want to do? I think I've covered everything, unless we want to talk more about Duran Duran, which is always an option. Yeah, question. Oh my gosh, it got so much better. Thank you for asking me that question. I got way better. Well, okay, so here's the thing. If you're a writer, the only compass you can follow is to write the story that you yourself would like to read. This same idea about reading for joy, it applies to readers, but it also applies to writers. All you can do is write. That's what guides you through, like, what should happen next? What's chapter 3 going to be about, right? The thing that's going to guide you to make those choices, because it could be anything, is what would your own inner reader want to see happen next, And the only way to figure that out is to pay attention to what you love. And so as I discovered what I really love in a story, like I now am very clear about my purpose as a writer in a way that I wasn't 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I've been at this a long time. I'm basically the great-grandma of rom-coms at this point. When I first started, I just wanted to write something good, but I didn't know exactly what that meant. And I'd had a lot of literary training early on. Vassar College, University of Houston's creative writing program, which is ranked 2nd in the nation, always duking it out with Johns Hopkins for which one's going to get to be number 2. I got a master's from there. It was all very literary. So I had to go through like a long process of de-snobification to kind of find my own true set of interests. What I like to kind of figure out what it is that I really, really love. Not what I thought was good, not what I thought was cool, not what I thought was literary, not what I thought was important, with a capital I, but like, just what do I love as a reader? If I had a fuzzy blanket and a hot cup of tea and a free Saturday, what kind of a story would I want to get lost in, right? And that, I think, is the most important thing any writer can do, is figure that out. Because that's the thing that's going to guide you. You can't, when you're figuring out what to write about in a story, it can't be like, well, what's popular right now? Or like, what's the market interested in? Or you can't use these external measures to guide you, because it will never be deep and soul nourishing if you're not steering it from the inside out, right? If your heart's not leading you through the story. So yeah, I got way better, way better. If you read my books, read them in reverse. Start with the newest and go backwards. Okay, other questions? Don't be shy. I'm very chatty. We could be here all night. I'll just go and go. Does anybody want to ask me what it was like to meet Josh Duhamel? Some of you have already heard this story, but it's my only topic of conversation, really. Oh, what was my gateway romance novel? Thank you for asking. It was a novel by a writer named Tessa Dare. It's a little grocery store romance novel. She's fantastic. I still madly love her. Her dialogue is so snappy. And she also, the hardest part for me when I'm reading is always getting started. You know, like the first chapter of a book where you're like, who are these people and why do I care? Like it takes you a minute to kind of, like at first you have to push yourself into the story, and then there's a moment when the story grabs you and starts pulling you through. She pulls you through from the first page. Like on the first page, you know who this person is and what's at stake, and you're invested and you care. And everybody's funny and everybody's charming and delightful. Delightful. Also, then after her, I discovered Julia Quinn, who's a romance writer, who's also fantastic banter. Lisa Kleypas, also good, if you need recommendations. This is not for the children, by the way. These are spicy. I was quite shocked by it as a very PG-13 person myself. And also, I do write stories. Like the books that I write are sort of half women's fiction, which is just fiction with women in it, right? And then half love story is what I write. But mine are very PG-13, safe to share with grandma. And that is because my husband is a middle school teacher. And his children are always curious to know what Mr. Center's wife is writing. So we have book festivals, and the parents like buy all these books for their sixth graders that I've written, and they have me sign them, you know, like to Brittany. And then you know, you could make the argument that it might be better for them to learn about spice from like a good-hearted person like myself than say the internet or something. But I just can't handle the pressure. I'm a very PG-13 kind of person. And some people really don't like that. I discovered that recently. I wrote a book called The Bodyguard that a lot of people wished had been spicier, I discovered on Goodreads. There were a lot of people calling me by name on Goodreads reviews. Katherine Center, give us some spice. But then there were also other people who were like, I'm so relieved I can give this to my daughter-in-law and it's not creepy, right? It's not weird. I can share this with my mom. We can read it in a book club. So anyway, my destiny is to be married to a middle school teacher and to always write PG-13 kind of stories. So, did I answer? I can't even remember what your question was. Did I answer it? Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Anybody else want to ask me anything? Yeah? Ooh. My standard joke about going to creative writing school is that it's kind of a worthless degree. I did apply for a lot of jobs after getting that master's, and I got rejected for all of them. But that could have just been me, you know. I had a bad suit at the time. It could have been a fashion problem. I don't know. I generally would say that I think that writing is a very self-taught type of activity, and that you learn to do it by reading, and that you learn to do it by writing, just constantly, like an obsessive lunatic. That's really the main ways of learning how to write. But that said, I did have a lot of fun in graduate school. I got to teach freshman English. It gave me time, you know, because your schedule's not that grueling when you're in grad school. So there was time. A lot of people use that time to like drink beer. I was writing. So I think there are upsides to it, but I don't think you have to do it that way. You know what I mean? A lot of the writers that I know did not go to grad school. I just really did it because I wasn't sure what to do with myself next. So it seemed like, and I got in, which was a happy surprise. I was like, I'll do that. So I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Every now and then I get an email from a man who says, My wife told me to read your book. I took it to the beach. I was widely mocked by my friends, but I loved it. I know. My husband always reads my books, which I love. He's a very strong man. He knows who he is. And I wrote a book called Things You Save in a Fire that's about firefighters. And he is a volunteer firefighter. So that is his favorite book. He rereads the firefighting parts a lot. He skips the love parts, but he rereads the firefighting parts. I'll catch him in the living room. I'll be like, "Are you reading my book?" He'll be like, "Yeah, it's good." Oh, that's such a tough question. Well, Nicholas Sparks leaps to mind, but he doesn't really write romance because a lot of them don't have happy endings. And for me, it's really not a romance novel unless it ends well. Because such an essential part of that romance reading experience is that positively valenced movement, that anticipation that's leading you towards something better, something good to look forward to. And so, if they're all just going to die in the end, that's not a romance. It's a story. It's just not a romance, right? I haven't read a lot of guy romance writers. But if anybody knows of one, let me know. I'd love to check it out. No, I'm too old to be offended by anything anymore. Do I get offended when people mock romance? Is your question? Yeah. No, because it's fine. I think we are a funny culture about romance. We were really hard on it. And what I will say about that is that we roll our eyes the hardest at romance and love stories. And we say, they're so unrealistic. We say this out loud as we turn on like another zombie apocalypse movie. So I think there's a very interesting sort of double standard going on. I used to maintain very strongly that romance novels were no more ridiculous than any other kind of novel that we all love, or any other kind of fictional world that we love to disappear into. I mean, Marvel movies, come on. They're fun, but they're goofy. They are goofy. Oh, I'm going to get in so much trouble from the internet for saying that. But actually, I'm kind of, I've been switching a little bit as I, become older and wiser. At this point, I really have decided that the hill I'm going to die on is standing up for love stories, because I think the thing that drives love stories, the thing that pushes those stories forward, the thing that is guiding us all to this happy ending that we all want to get to, are pro-social behaviors. They're like the best parts of humanity. You don't get your happy ending unless you learn how to be a good listener, a nice person, compassionate, unless you get good at empathy, right? Unless you take care of people when they have fevers, right? Give people piggyback rides. You have to do kind things. That's what's driving those novels. Pro-social behaviors, positive human interactions, closeness, intimacy, tenderness, compassion. All these things that the world would actually do really well to get a lot better at, honestly. And the same thing is not driving serial killer novels, right? That's not pro-social behaviors. Feeding human corpses into wood chippers is not pro-social. That's not something we need more of in the world. So, yeah, I understand how things work. I know that it's a genre that gets poo-pooed. For a long time, I just tried not to worry about it, because I knew what I loved, But now I'm getting a little feistier about it, and I've decided I'm going to start standing up for these books. I think that they really have a lot to teach us about how to be better people. So that's my new thing. I'm going to get it on a t-shirt. Okay, maybe one more question. I don't know how much time we have. I don't know what day of the week it is either, by the way. I'm very bad at being in charge of time. Yeah. Thank you for that valuable question. I chose Simon Le Bon, but I also think John Taylor would have been a nice option. And I will tell you, I did a TEDx talk a couple of years ago in Bend, Oregon, in front of 1,400 people. And I told that story about Duran Duran. And when it was over, this woman came up to me at the after party and she was like, okay. What would you do if Duran Duran saw your TED Talk and showed up at your house? And I was like, oh, nonsense. That would never happen. Thank you so much. But like an hour later with my husband in the hotel room, I was like, okay, if they do show up, I'm going to need you to hightail it out of there. I got some unfinished business. We got some things to talk about. Yeah, I mean, again, I really feel like love in life is a very good guide towards leading us towards the good stuff. And, luckily for all of us, I think we're all relieved that I am not still writing Duran Duran fan fiction. But what I will say is that the books that I write now are not that different. I mean, they're still trying to do basically the same thing. I am still trying to write stories that are funny and uplifting, that make us all feel better, that give us things to look forward to, that help us all, myself included, feel hopeful about the future. That's not an easy thing to do, but the goals are actually still kind of the same. It's a little bit less 80s fashion, than it used to be. But it's the same. I mean, I'm still kind of motivated by the exact same things. I'm just trying to lift us all up. So I guess on that's a good place to end. I guess on that note, that's a good thing. So thank you guys. You were awesome. Thank you.